Hi, I'm Greg Lambert with the Geek in Review, and I'm here with our friend Nikki Shaver, who is going to talk to us about the adoption of resources and the tools they have there at LTH. So, Nikki, tell us more.
Hi, Greg. Good to see you. So I am here to talk to you about some resources that we've just launched on Legal Tech Hub. When generative AI launched into the legal market, people sort of assumed that you didn't really have to worry about adoption. And that's because the interface of an AI assistant, that open chat box, looks really appealing and easy to use, and all of us use it now in our personal lives. But the reality is that for most legal work, you really a chat interface is not the most useful. You can do tasks with it, but you can't undertake workflows. And even for legal work that can be done through an AI assistant interface, you need lawyers to learn how to optimally use the technology. Adoption really still is an issue, and firms are grappling with it. And methodologies that can help to drive adoption are really still necessary. So, recent studies have indicated that although approximately 70% of the MLaw 100 firms have rolled out some form of generative AI firm wide, adoption rates of that technology hover around 25%. Obviously, some firms have a much higher adoption rate, some firms have a lower adoption rate, but we know that it is still an issue and still something people need to deal with. So, we have on the site a number of adoption resources to help people. And we've just published, in addition to the other adoption resources we've had on the site for some time, a series of 4 new papers that provide tangible, practical best practices, guidelines, and checklists to help law firms and other legal AI buyers develop the kinds of programs that will genuinely help drive internal adoption. So we really hope those will be useful. Come along and find them on legaltechnologyhub.com. And if you can't access them for whatever reason, feel free to reach out to us.
All right. Well, that sounds super useful. I can tell you from experience that adoption is one of the hardest things to do. So, any help we can get in that is really appreciated. So, thank you, Nikki.
Absolutely.
Welcome to the Geek in Review, the podcast focused on innovative and creative ideas in the legal industry. I'm Marlene Gaybauer.
And I'm Greg Lambert. This week, we are thrilled to welcome back a guest who really truly embodies the intersection of legal innovation and the human experience of being a lawyer. Anusia Gillespie has built a career as a change agent at the highest levels of the legal industry. I think when we last talked to her, she was the head of innovation at Eversheds Sutherland and driving innovation and transformation there. And now currently she's the enterprise lead at vLex, which we all heard recently was acquired in part of a landmark acquisition by Clio.
And if that wasn't enough, she's also a debut novelist. Her book Soul Toll is a contemporary fantasy that explores the personal cost of the high-performance culture she's had to work to transform from the inside. The book's out on October 7th. Anusha, welcome to the Geek in Review.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be back.
Yeah. We were looking. It's been almost 6 years, I think, since
That
we
just
were
can't be
on
possible.
last, and we were talking about the name of that episode, which was the new big laws innovation confusion disorder, which we've decided is an evergreen
Yeah,
title that we could probably put on all of our shows.
that's
Maybe,
true.
maybe that's what we should have named the podcast.
It's
So
catchy. It's very
yeah, it
catchy.
is. It is. So, Anusha, you've had quite the fascinating career. You started off as a commercial real estate finance attorney, but you said that, you almost immediately realized that you went to law school because, you really wanted to help lawyers. And so instead of practicing, you chose to help by trying to fix the systems in which we all work in. That through your work as a consultant, your innovation roles, including your stint there at Harvard, and now at the forefront of legal with the AI and vLex. So I'm just curious, what was the moment that you realized that, to truly help lawyers, you had to change the system and technology that they used every day?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It wasn't one moment; it was more of a series of moments. And I think, no kid is like, "Oh, I want to help lawyers when I grow up." So I had to evolve into that kind of mission and purpose statement as well. But I think where it really started was I was working at a litigation boutique before law school, and one day at lunch, the accountant didn't come back, and everyone was looking around for the accountant. Her shoes were still like piled under her desk. And there was a Coke on her desk, I remember still. And so it was just kind of like she got up and left and didn't come back. And it was the accountant. It was a little concerning. And turned out she had embezzled millions of dollars and her house of cards was about to fall. And so she literally took the money and ran. And I was just blown away because I've been working with these lawyers, these accomplished, smart lawyers, and then this business of law issue happened right under their nose. And so it just was the stark contrast for me on really smart lawyers having this business issue. And I got interested in the business of law and pursued my JD MBA for partly for that reason. And then it just kept evolving from there. As a law firm associate, I knew that the only way to get agency in your career is to develop business. But in commercial real estate, we represented banks. And guess what? They were all accounted for already. So the only way to develop business was to be handed down accounts. It was all part of this system. And that's when I started seeing kind of these systems that we were working in and began to think in systems terms. And then, as you mentioned at Harvard, what people were really trying to figure out was innovation. And so that's where I started kind of leaning in and saying, all right, there's something here to solve for that's going to help lawyers in the industry at large.
Anusha, you've been a professional change agent inside some of the legal world's most complex and risk averse organizations. From your time at Eversheds Sutherland to UnitedLex to vLex, you've been focused on getting lawyers to embrace new ways of working. What would you say is the biggest misconception that technologists have about lawyers? And what have you found to be the true key to earning their trust and getting them to adopt innovation that generally makes their lives better?
So the biggest misconception that I've seen is that negative reactions to technology, especially by powerful partners, is to be avoided at all costs. You don't want to have that kind of reaction, and I get that. You don't want to introduce something too early and have someone have a poor experience and then have to win them over again. That's not a good experience. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more kind of this energy that a lawyer might have. And to me, any kind of energy around what I'm, trying to manage and bring someone into is good. It means I have their attention, whether it's a positive or a negative reaction. And so now we just have to figure out how to use it. So I think the biggest misconception is that a negative reaction is really, really bad and a sense of failure. Whereas if you say, well, wait, let's just lean into that more and use that energy to bring that person around and be our biggest champion, that's an opportunity. And that happened recently, actually, we're working at vLex with Stradley Ronan and building out a big curriculum with them. And there was a lateral litigation partner who was frustrated. He didn't think he had the tools that he needed, that he did have at his larger firm. And so he thought he needed to redact all the information in order to use the tools that Stradley had. And so had some of this kind of negative reaction. And I said, watch, within 3 weeks, this guy's going to be one of the biggest champions as long as you invest the time to get him in there and help solve and show him how this works. And then, within a week or two, he found a client use and got a piece of work product done that literally allowed him to go to a baseball game that night. And the next morning, he got an email from the client saying, you knocked it out of the park. Like, how perfect of a story with a bow on it is that, and became a champion. So I've found opportunity in that energy and those reactions.
Yeah, that's interesting. That reminds me of a story. Um, at my previous firm, we had a lateral partner that was coming in, and I actually had someone from his old firm call me and just say, "Oh my God, this guy is like a negative Nelly. You're not going to have any fun with him." Um, he's got strong opinions, and so what I did was the first day he was there, I like met him at his office, and I was like, "Hey, I want to know what is it that you're needing? What is it you're looking for?" And it turned out funny enough, the only thing he wanted was fast case, uh, because there was something that he used for that. And I was like, you know what? I will make sure that, because we didn't have a subscription to Fastcase. I'm like, but I'm going to make sure you get Fastcase. And I did. I went out and I got a subscription for him. And he was like the biggest champion for us after that. So, yeah, I think a lot of times it's finding out what that need is, and then determine, at least letting them know they're being heard. I think a lot of times those types of emotions continue because people avoid them, and instead of addressing it and letting everyone know, hey, at least I'm hearing you, they're just sitting there festering, and I'm sure they're getting their resume ready for their next lateral move, because nobody's listening to me. So good story on that. Um, Now, I want to jump into your book, Soul Toll, which I believe if we're releasing this show on October 6th, it's coming out tomorrow. So excited, very excited. Um, so the book itself is what you might call a visionary fiction, and I think you've kind of combined a couple of things from contemporary fiction, and then you've got this kind of portal fantasy mix that comes in, and your main protagonist, Ember, is this high achieving lawyer at a very prestigious firm who feels a deep disconnect from the life that she's pursuing. Just total fiction, right? Just
Absolutely.
and I think she feels disconnected from the life she's pursuing, and ultimately she's discovering that her ambition in life was kind of engineered. And this sounds like a really powerful allegory. So, without giving away too much of the story here, how do you describe Ember's fictional journey and reflect it often reflects this kind of real, often unspoken soul toll that you've observed in the legal profession, and trying to connect those themes to the day to day that you do, trying to build better systems for lawyers.
Thank you for asking about Soul Toll. It is out tomorrow, and I've been describing it as a leadership book in fantasy clothing because there's a lot of actionable insights to take away. But I wanted to tell it through story for a variety of reasons, including the impact that I saw the Harvard case study method having in executive education programs, where practicing lawyers were able to engage with material through story in a much more objective way than through other kinds of learning modalities. So that's some of just the thought process behind the book and kind of where it fits. I just received a Kirkus review, which is a really long-standing review platform that called it a genre blending or genre blurring novel, and they saw that too. And I was so thrilled that they saw that it was this mix of motivation and fantasy, because it wasn't, this is new. I wasn't quite sure if that was going to come across. But so that's what we're working with here. And there's a lot to unpack from your question of how is this a powerful allegory.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, we're known for our complex questions here.
Yeah, so the phrase that her ambition was engineered, I'll start there. And what this is referring to is that she was placed on a track within law with a predefined definition of success and with incentives and constraints that keep her there chasing the next rung. And there's a line from a recent reader. I keep having these early readers reaching out, and it's so exciting when they
That's
say, "Oh,
cool.
this line really, resonated with me." And she said the line that stuck out to her in her late night reading last night was that the systems are designed for you to run out of time. And so you never get to win. And so that's kind of what that her ambition was engineered means. It means it's pointing her in a direction and then keeping her there without her ability to kind of pave her own path. And so she's having to listen to what's been created before her. Um, the term soul toll is something I'd like to unpack a bit too. I think we've all heard of the phrase of soul sucking work, like having to turn your insides off to show up. And soul toll is an attempt to turn that more into a helpful framework, where it's more what's your ratio of soul and toll in your work, in your life, holistically. And how can you work with that to adjust those percentages to a place that feels right for you? It's not 100% soul or 100% toll. Neither one is necessarily the right answer. There's growth in toll, but you just got to find, and be aware of what's going into each of those so that you can move them around as you move through life. And there's a chapter in the book where Ember must confront the soul toll. And it's a transaction where she's given the option to trade a piece of her soul as the toll to gain access to a comfortable and luxurious shortcut to reach her destination. And while in this chapter, this is kind of a stark moment in time, sometimes the tolls that we pay aren't that obvious and they're much more subtle. And so that's a kind of a recurring piece throughout the book as well, not quite so explicitly, but that I think relates to our everyday lives as well, where these tolls can creep up and suddenly your job that you signed up for that was 70% soul and 30% toll and was feeling really good, it erodes into an unsustainable 100% toll job and you flatline and you don't realize how you got there because you weren't paying attention to it. Um, so that's another piece, and then the third, and then I promise I'll hand the mic back over in
Take your
answering your
time.
No,
question.
this is your interview, so
Okay. Is how does this theme connect with my day job of building better systems for lawyers? So always, kind of reconnecting to the top here. First, we want lawyers to be healthy, high-performing athletes to contribute their highest and best to the legal operating system of the world. It is an important profession. We want people bringing their best. And they simply can't achieve this without awareness and regulation of their physical, mental, and emotional health and well-being. And so they should have a regular pulse on where they are on this spectrum of soul and toll. And the soul toll framework kind of gives them a tool to do so. And I think it's a really approachable, easy tool that isn't too woo-woo or too, intensive. It's pretty quick. It's pretty easy. And I think, pretty helpful. Second is that my day job is in legal technology, and we are putting more and more of the drudgery of being a lawyer into machines, and that's a really good thing. It's a systemic improvement that better positions lawyers to do higher brow work and connect to the mission and people of that work in doing so. And so that's kind of creating more room for soul, more room for all of these other pieces, and that's how it all comes together.
Yeah, interesting. I was talking to a group this morning, and one of the things they were all asking about the drudgery of work and what AI could do, and I said, well, it's really interesting because for one of the first times in my career, at least in a long time, when I go to meetings with attorneys and we talk about things that they're doing with some of the new technologies, there's an energy and excitement level that hasn't been there, in quite a while. Is it just me, or Anusia, are you seeing that as well?
No, I feel it too. I think that moving from process and automation to something generative and like immediate is just a whole different ballgame that, yeah, is much more exciting. Lawyers are not steeped necessarily in process mapping. Automation wasn't necessarily going to be such an exciting process to go through. Maybe the output of it.
Well, speak for yourself. I was looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm feeling it too.
There was in your dedication to the book, you dedicated it to your son, but then the line is always fight for your light, which also kind of shows up as the thematic line in the novel toward the end. So what does this phrase mean to you both personally, and what are you trying to hope that your readers take away from that message?
Thank you. So I had a moment, and I'm going to keep coming back to story because that's what we're doing here. When after I left my law firm as an associate, the managing partner asked me to come back almost a year later and just talk about the reasons that I had left. And at some point in the conversation, I found myself putting one hand over my heart, like completely unintentionally or without thought, and saying, I just felt my light dimming. And in that moment, I thought he was going to roll his eyes at me or dismiss me. And instead, he said, well, that happened quickly. Like he understood completely of what I was talking about, which was equally as surprising to me. And
It's like,
I
you
love
knew this whole time and you didn't tell
You
me?
didn't say anything?
exactly. Or, that's a conversation we can have. And so that's kind of where it started, was in that experience and that with the managing partner. And then I've just found, through this kind of soul toll analysis as I go, the more toll, the more you lose that light, the more you lose yourself. And when people ask me to describe the book, I say, all right, put the story aside. What it's about is the courage to pave your path in a world that's telling you who to be. And how can you have the courage to pave your path if you don't know what that light is, if you're not connected to it? And also understand that this world isn't just built to shine all the time. And so there's going to be a constant battle against having that light and protecting it and fighting for it. And so that was my message, is it's important work for the greater good and for yourself, to really fight for your light.
Yeah, I love that idea, and you're right, that is work. I think that's exactly the right way to phrase it, because it's something you gotta think about and do every day, in a world where, you're just kinda doing your day-to-day work, and, you just gotta come back and remember, um, you know, what is it that makes me shine, and how can I, capture that and keep it. So, Anusha, your work unifying legal tech with AI is a massive change management challenge. Now, in Soul Toll, we see a cautionary tale of what happens when the human element's ignored. So, there's lawyers who become burnout wanderers because, a firm prioritizes the grind above all else. So, as you build this future, what's the single most important thing law firm leaders should do right now on the ground, to ground their people into light, ensuring they don't become a generation of wanderers in the technological landscape?
Thank you for using the book's terminology. I feel privileged that you read it that deeply. So
Wanders
thank
with a
you.
capital W.
Um, so this isn't a easy solution, but I think it's the solution. And I think the biggest impediment to change in the legal profession is the billable hour. But I'm saying that perhaps not for the reasons that you might think. And it's more that change and transformation starts with, as my father would say, what's going on between the ears. And how do I, if the thought process with a lawyer is always, how do I shorten this conversation so that I can get back to my billable hours just like on repeat, then not much is going to get done beyond doing the same thing that we've always done. So I say billable hour because it impacts the attorney mindset so much. It took me a full year to stop thinking in 6-minute increments, and I only practiced for less than 2 years. So imagine that rewiring of people who practice for a really long time. Um, and the single most important thing to prepare people for what's coming is to solve for this impediment to innovation and collaboration, adaptability, agility, and make it as part of that initiative, like really widely known and trained on in the firm as to why they're doing that and what's expected. It's a huge change management effort, but that's what I think has to be done.
Yeah. Um, the back to or in Soul Toll, Ember's burnout is fueled by this kind of soul crushing manual legal work that, as we were talking about, AI is now able to automate at least in some instances right now. Um, and it was funny. I think there was one part where you were using the Control F imagery of, it's like, oh, here's how I've got to find the information. And it as we kind of implement the technology to help us kind of get away from the drudgery of the control F, um, do you think that the very definition of professional competence needs to evolve in some way? Is there like a new ethical duty to use that reclaimed time to focus much more on the deeper human aspects of the profession, kind of in the way that your character had to journey to this resonance in order to find?
Yeah, I struggle with this question a lot. I interviewed um, Bob Ambrogi, Ed Walters, and some other experts in this area, Kat Moon, a number of years ago for an article that explored this. And where I struggle is how much of this is ethics and how much is market forces that shapes how this plays out. And is it an ethical duty to innovate or an ethical duty to keep pace with and adopt technology? And I view those as different things. Um, so, in order to provide a concrete answer to the question, the easiest way for me to think about it is in the context of solo lawyers and uninformed buyers. If I'm protecting the consumer in that instance, then yes, I think a lawyer should have an affirmative responsibility to keep pace with and adopt relevant new technologies. And you can't, create those kind of duties just for one type of lawyer versus another type of lawyer. So then I think it has to be across the board. But maybe market forces shape the actual behaviors more as you go into bigger organizations.
Can you dive a little deeper into what kind of market forces are you seeing or have seen that drive that?
Yeah, by market forces, I mean clients adopting these tools themselves and knowing what they can do, and then pushing back on law firms and the way that they're delivering services in RFPs, asking what technologies you're using and providing a lot of pressure that way. Um, Market forces and consolidation in kind of mid-sized law firms that must adopt this technology to compete. So all of those kinds of forces that are influencing behavior.
So before we get to the crystal ball question, we'd like to know, what are some of the ways that you keep up to date, that you stay inspired, like on all that's happening in the industry? Are there some go-to sources that you rely on to keep up with all the changes?
Well, the Geek in Review podcast,
We got
obviously.
to put in there besides the geek and
Besides the
review.
geek and review.
I'm quite fortunate at vLex to have internal channels, and including a competitive intelligence channel where some of the best minds in the world and legal are constantly sharing. So that's a really incredible resource that I have internally at vLex. And then the other best resource is age old, my close friends in legal innovation that I'm texting with, and it's just like the watering hole of reality versus the hype of the media. So those are the places I go.
That's a great quote. We're going to use that. That might be the title. What do you think, Greg? Okay, so
Um,
go ahead, Greg.
but
Sorry.
I was gonna say how much do you have to listen to Ed Walters in that group there? I guess you got also now you got Joshua Lennon. Are you working with the Clio folks as well now?
We are going through integration activities. There are limits on ways that we're allowed to collaborate for antitrust purposes. So, yes, we have work streams going, but there are some things that are off limits.
Okay, now it's time for the crystal ball question. So, looking ahead a few years, a few months, a few days, what is the biggest change or challenge that you see for the legal profession, considering both rapid technological evolution that you're driving at, vLex and the human-centric needs that you explore in Soul Toll?
So, what really struck me at the Legal Tech Hub Innovation Conference recently in New York was I kept hearing people say, when this slows down. then I'm gonna take a break. Yeah,
That's
exactly.
funny.
I said that in
So
1999.
this isn't going to slow down. There's not a when X event happens and I'm gonna be able to take my foot off the gas and recover from this sprint. Like it's just not where we are. It's been 3 years already since Gen AI hit the scene. I haven't slowed down yet. Have you over the past 3 years?
Things don't slow down. It's like they'll stay at
Yeah.
least at this pace or faster.
Yeah, and so when there's no natural pause anymore, people are gonna have to create that for themselves and set new real boundaries, or I think on the human side, we're going to see a lot of, people burn out and drop out really fast to end on a
Yeah, I think
positive
that's
note.
that's true.
Yeah.
It's like the technological pace is not the same as the human pace to just
Yes.
kind of absorb all of this stuff. And, we have to, for our own health, have to recognize that and sort of bake in those safeguards.
Well, I'm just curious
Except
as a
Greg. Greg can.
as a follow. Yeah, I'm perfectly fine.
He's a robot.
I got this full head of dark brown hair. So, I'm curious on because of what you've been doing over these years. Um, how do you? What I guess a couple of things. Do you look for signs in that, and then is there? And I know you are uh, you're into yoga as well. Are there is there a way to kind of like when you've identified the signs to work with people to kind of find that balance and restore that light a little bit? Is there suggestions you have?
Yeah, that's another really big question for the very close of a podcast, but yes, I think that I mean, there are true, like, clinical signs where people are ruminating and, their kind of brain feels raw and they're just on the verge of burnout, and that's a, kinda different model too versus some of what we're talking about. I think that the, like, waking up feeling behind, the complete sense of overwhelm, like, looking at your week and wondering how you're going to handle it, like, those kinds of very real feelings that come up are pretty good indicators of maybe I need to think about this a little bit differently here. I just had a conversation this morning with someone of how to say no. And it's like for me, one of those tools is I have three things I'm working on, and if it doesn't fit into one of those three buckets, then it's a no. And that's not me saying no; that's the bucket saying no. Don't get mad at me. That's what we agreed to. So I think things like that in a very real, practical sense, and then just in a more metaphysical sense, I think you just know. I think like if you are really honest with yourself, and just take a minute to think about it, which we don't do, we know where we are a little bit. And if you don't, which I've actually seen too, I saw a comment from a lawyer on LinkedIn, where it was up to Adam Grant, and Adam Grant was talking about flow. And the lawyer asked, "How do you know if you're in flow?" And I was just like, "How do you not know if you're in flow? Of course you know that, you know?" And I was like, "Oh, like, but I forget sometimes that people just haven't approached these topics before, don't know when they're in flow, don't know when they're like able to kind of be in their body or not. And so I would say for me where that started was over 10 years ago, being forced to meditate through my yoga training program, and I hated it. And I wanted to run away. But then that made me really curious of why can't I sit with myself for 10 minutes? Like that's not good. And so if you need a really practical place to start, you don't have to meditate. You can just sit with yourself for 10 minutes and see what that's like.
Interesting. Yeah, one of the things, and it was I love the when you said waking up feeling behind. And I know this is much easier to say than it is to actually implement. But I think a lot of us want to get to that place where we go to bed feeling like we've accomplished something, rather than waking up and feeling behind. And it's kind of striking that balance. Like I said, easy to say, hard to do. But it's one of those things. If you can get there, life will be a lot easier. So, well, Anusia Gillespie, enterprise lead at vLex and author of the brand new novel coming out tomorrow, Soul Toll. Thank you very much for this has been a really incredible, insightful conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. I really appreciate it.
And thanks to all of you, our listeners, for taking the time to listen to the Geek and Review podcast. If you enjoy the show, please share it with a colleague. We'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn and TikTok.
Yeah, I put out a weird TikTok this week, so I don't know if you saw it.
Check out Greg's weird TikTok.
Yeah, well, it wasn't weird. It was just me recapping, so different, not weird,
really
so,
weird.
Yeah, but it was weird. So, Anusia, enough about our TikTok. If listeners want to learn more about your work there at vLex and of course, where they can find Soul Toll, where's the best place for them to go?
I'm active on LinkedIn. I would love for people to reach out and connect with me. And then you can find Soul Toll on Amazon.
Yeah, tell her what your favorite line of the book is.
And as always, the music you hear is from Jerry David DeSica. Thank you very much, Jerry.
All right. Thanks, Jerry. Bye, everyone.
Bye.